Next presenting company is Harvard Apparatus Regenerative Technologies, and here to tell us the story is David Green, who's the CEO.
Usually I take about 20 to 25 minutes of this, so I'm going to go a little quick today to try to catch us up. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Or I'm sorry, I'll do it like this. Okay, so we are a public company. Okay, so we make regenerated organs for transplant. I know it sounds a little bit like science fiction. I was on Bloomberg television just this morning trying to explain the same thing to their interviewer. But it really is true. I'll show you a short movie showing how the patients recover from this. There are 8 patients successfully treated so far, so we're very rare amongst this group of regenerative medicine companies because we already have clinical evidence of efficacy. Not proof, we still have to go through all the phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trials, but strong evidence of efficacy before we even start. We basically take a scaffold made of plastic, we take cells from the patient's bone marrow, we combine them in a bioreactor, we cook it for 3 days prior to transplant. That's been done in 8 patients. The last 5 of those used our scaffolds. It's about 600 million per year. Our pipeline is other organs, including other hollow organs first. I think you'll see esophagus being the next. But then the heart and the lung are coming, but they're clearly much further out. We're doing that in collaboration with some of the world's top institutions. We built a business here. I'm the CEO. We built this with patents. We already have issued patents, plus many in the pipeline. We expect to get orphan exclusivity in both the US and Europe, and we're the first mover in this space, and we expect to be the first mover for a long time to come. Gives a very substantial barrier to entry compared to others. We're extremely capital efficient. By focusing on these fatal indications, you can get through very small clinical trials and get onto the market quickly. And we're very committed to making this a success for the shareholders as well as for patients. I personally own about 5% of the company. Quick snapshot, we're listed on NASDAQ, about 70 million market cap, 14 million in cash at the end of the year, we just reported. About 2 years of capital at the current burn, 8 million shares, there's no preferred, no warrants, no funky things on the balance sheet, very plain vanilla. Average daily trading volume actually is about 300,000 shares a day now, it's gone up significantly recently. And we were originally a subsidiary of a public company called Harvard Bioscience. We were spun off 100% on November 1st last year. Top institutional holders, well-known institutions in the space. I challenge you to find another cell therapy or regenerative medicine company with a better institutional following than us. Now I'm just going to show you a short video, and if I can just ask the IT guy, there you go.
Probably
Perfect,
everybody
thanks.
of you have seen the patient. She's a wonderful girl that unfortunately has had a car accident during the 6 months of pregnancy, for which, among other things, she has a complete transected airway. So tomorrow, we plan to do the first in human ever done laryngotracheal transplants using bioartificial scaffolds.
So we take these CAT scans, CT scans of the patient's neck. From the dimensions, we make this replica in plastic, the exact replica of the patient's windpipe or trachea. And the stem cells are seeded, almost rained down on top of the scaffold inside the bioreactor.
Und wir glauben, dass es in naher Zukunft möglich sein wird, Patienten maßgeschneiderte Organe zur Verfügung zu stellen.
What we're doing today, people never thought was possible. What we've been able to accomplish has changed how medicine has been thought of.
Tomorrow, 2 of the best airway surgeons in the world will operate together. If we don't achieve this, who should do it?
Stop the video. Stop the video. Okay, that actually wasn't the correct video. That was actually the preview for the 1-hour documentary which was made about those surgeries and those patients, which was aired in European television. That was the preview for it. The real movie I intended to show you shows all that nice drama, hospital stuff as well, but also shows you an interview with one of the patients 2 days after the surgery at a press conference talking to the cameras. Okay? And the purpose of the video is to illustrate the dramatic impact on the lives of these patients. Okay? So here's some of the data to support it. 6 of the 8 are still alive. That was published just a month ago. The world's first regenerated trachea transplant was done by us. The world's first with a synthetic scaffold was done by us, and the first in the US as well. Is there another way to advance the slides? This does not seem to be working. There you go. Okay, that's what it looks like. That's immediately prior to the implant. That's the scaffold seeded with the stem cells. It's bone marrow cells taken from the patient, so there's no immune rejection. The polymer we use to make the scaffold is the same as Dacron. If any of you have any surgical experience, it's one of the most widely implanted and safest polymers to implant in a human being. If you were a doctor now, you'd ask me 3 questions. You'd say, show me the bronchoscopy. That's the bronchoscopy looking down the trachea right there. That's a healthy looking bronchoscopy. You'd want to know what the cells look like on the scaffold. The red lines there are the fibers, and the green and the blue there are marking the cells. That's a good looking phenotype for the cells. They're stretched out. That's what mesenchymal stem cells do when they're happy. And you want to see cross-sectional histology. Obviously, you can't get that from a human, but you can get it from an animal. This on the left here is the natural trachea. This on the right is the synthetic trachea. And the critical thing is this purple continuous line on the inside, which is the epithelial lining or the lining of the trachea that clears mucus from the lungs. Without that, you will get pneumonia and die. It's about 6,000 patients per year split between trachea cancer, about 2,400 patients, and trachea trauma. I'm talking about people who are at risk of death from trachea trauma, not minor injuries. And at 100,000 per transplant, that's about $600 million to us. I'll talk about pricing in a minute, but that is the low end of our pricing range. In terms of strategy, we target only life-threatening medical conditions. Why? Because these are expensive products to develop, they're expensive products to manufacture. And so you have to have high medical value added. The advantage also extends to getting first in human under compassionate use rules. All these patients were treated under compassionate use rules. That gets us early clinical data that validates the product before we go into the most expensive part of development, the clinical trials. Also gives you that fast path to market, favorable reimbursement. We already have applied for orphan status in the US and EU, and a considerable amount of grant funding. That means we don't have to spend the money to do a lot of the clinical development work. Trachea is also a platform to other organs like the esophagus and the lungs. I know it sounds like science fiction. I'll show you what's coming in just a moment. In terms of our clinical trial design, this is our proposal. Very small number of patients, 30 patients, 3 sites. We have a site recruiting in Russia already, 1 in the EU and 1 in the US. This will be a single-arm open-label study. Of course, you cannot do randomized placebo-controlled studies when you're doing trachea transplants. We'll almost certainly use FEV1. That's a standard measure of lung function as the endpoint in the trial. We expect this all to be completed for FDA approval by the end of 2017, and likely somewhat earlier in Europe. The European pathways, as many of you probably know, are slightly more flexible than the US pathway. Very favorable reimbursement profile. You can't put a price on a human life, of course, but you can look at other pricing for comparable benefits. Typical cancer benefit is 3 to 4 months at $50,000 to $100,000. Those trachea trauma patients I mentioned are very expensive to treat. They're in the intensive care unit most of the time, typically $250,000. So the economics are definitely on our side. And these organ procurement costs disappear for those patients who have trachea cancer. And so we estimate $100,000 to $200,000 would be an attractive price to payers for this therapy. So we've talked really only about trachea up here. That's begun that clinical trial in Russia. But let me talk about lung and esophagus just for a moment. So this is a lung transplant, regenerated lung transplant in a rat. You're looking into the chest cavity here. This is the natural lung on the left. This is the regenerated lung on the right. And you can see the blood going in blue and coming out red. So even a layman can see this is working. The lung is working in terms of oxygenating the blood. Okay, that was done in 2010 at Mass General Hospital by Dr. Harold Ott using our equipment. This was similarly done using it. That is a human heart that has been completely decellularized. You can see the vascular structure is retained. That was done with Dr. Doris Taylor at the Texas Heart Institute. So this is coming. That's not in our projections or forecasts or anything. It's further out. But the simple hollow organs will come first. Trachea obviously is in humans at this point. I think esophagus will probably be the next. In terms of IP, we have issued patents on the bioreactors plus a load pending. The second patent is stated on the scaffolds. Macchiarini, I didn't mention because it says so in the video, but we didn't watch that. He's the lead surgeon on these. We just purchased his patents outright. We don't own any royalties. But patents are only one of 3 ways that we intend to defend this business for the long term. One is patent, second is the orphan exclusivity, and third is the first mover advantage. The standard of care for these patients is awful today. Median survival in trachea cancer is only about 10 months. So if standard of care is here, we come in here, the second mover has to come in here. Very difficult to do in an orphan indication. Me personally, I was the CEO of Harvard Bioscience, a successful public company. I built that company. I was founded it, 17 years as president and CEO, grew it, took it public. So I know what I'm doing here. My CFO also came with me from Harvard Bioscience. We both left successful jobs at a successful, profitable, revenue stage, profitable company to come and join this business. Why? Because I believe we've taken the critical risk out of this company. The critical risk is, do you fail in phase 3 trials? Does the product actually work? And with the 8 patients we've got, I think we have strong evidence of efficacy already. Our board is also industry veterans. There's no VCs, no hedge fund managers. Tom Robinson grew Boston Scientific's business. He ran their international business. Jim McGorry ran Genzyme's oncology business for 12 years. These guys are blue chip audit committee guys, both successful CFOs of public companies as well as from public accounting. In the near term, we expect, we had our pre-IND meeting with the FDA in January, very favorable response. I can go into that if anyone wants the details. We expect the equivalent in the EU in the second quarter. Orphan designation should come in the second quarter for the FDA and just after that in Europe. And we expect further patients to be treated in our Russian clinical trial. I'm not going to talk about comparables, don't really have time to do this today. So let me just recap then. So we make regenerated organs for transplant. It's initially for trachea cancer and trachea trauma. 8 successful transplants so far, 5 using our scaffolds, about a $600 million market opportunity for trachea alone, and that's in the paying world, North America plus Western Europe. The pipeline is other organs like the lung, esophagus, heart valves, and heart with world-leading institutions. I'll end it there, and we'll have questions afterwards. Thank you.